The shooting range. In this episode, Pages of History, the tank that wouldn't go away. Round study, Super Pershing endurance test, and Metal Beasts, the grandfather of Chinese tanks. The legendary T-54 became famous for its simplicity and reliability. When Chinese engineers received this machine from the Soviet Union, they adapted it for their army's needs. The results of their work can now be found in the Chinese tech tree under the name of Type 59. The tank is armed with a vertically stabilized 100mm gun with elevation angles between -4 and 17 degrees, as well as 2 machine guns. The layout is classic with the engine compartment in the rear. The space beyond the front armor is big enough to hold fuel tanks, ammo racks, and the driver. Other tankers sit next to the ammo racks in the center of the machine or in the turret. Among all the rounds available for this tank, we recommend you take a close look at the BR-412D, the APC-BC one. It can blow up basically any MBT if a penetration occurs. If your target is too heavily armored, switch to the Heat FS. Much like other tanks of the family, the Type 59 is a balanced machine. It performs well both as an assault and the support machine. As soon as the battle starts, head off to the disputed capture areas and find a medium-range position. The Type 59 has a lower maneuverability compared to Western tanks, but it does have a stabilizer to enable shooting on the move. The tank will feel best on a flat landscape since depression angles are very modest. You might also want to find something to hide your upper glacis, leaving only the turret exposed to your enemies. Don't get too bold, though. After making your shot, retreating immediately is a good idea. Even if the round the enemy fires back at you doesn't penetrate the armor, it can still easily damage the barrel. Should that happen, your tank will turn into a very proud, albeit harmless, tractor for a while. The main advantage it has over Western MBTs are the APC-BC rounds. They basically rip Italian, French, and German tanks to shreds. AA vehicles and IFVs are blown apart too, unless their armor is too thin for the fuse to go off. Remember, though, that APC-BC rounds have worse ballistics than the Sabot ones, and the Chinese 100mm gun takes a while to reload. That's why you might want to make every shot count. Sending 1 round at the enemy and getting 2 back isn't nice, right? Well, on the other hand, you can always try angling to win another attempt. The flight trajectory and the low turret turn speed might create a few issues for you before you get used to it. Moreover, there's no night vision device on this machine, so playing in the dark requires you to be extra cautious. How about a rangefinder? Also, none. Which means you might need to play around on the test range if you want to be a sharp shooter. Check the minimap often, and if you see an enemy headed to you, use your hull to turn quickly and meet them with a winning strike. The Panzer IV is the most mass-produced Wehrmacht tank that had served throughout the whole war. Surprisingly, the Germans themselves had mixed feelings about it. The weapons agency would often try to limit the tank's role to support or even stop the production altogether. Despite their efforts, the Panzer IV would always stay relevant, and its production continued. Why did it happen? Well, let's try and find out. Shortly before the war, the German factories were working on 2 medium tanks. The Panzer III was a mass-produced versatile tank with a 37mm gun, while the 4th version was supposed to be a support tank with a 75mm stud gun. The Army believed in the third version with torsion bar suspension and some other advanced tech. Of course, the rough and slow Panzer IV looked clumsy and outdated in comparison. It looked like its production should be stopped, and the third version should simply get the more powerful gun. Fat chance. Panzer III models E and F turned out to be flawed and issue-ridden. Their production plan missed all the deadlines, and the Army sent a whole flow of complaints to the engineers. Meanwhile, Panzer IV continued to be built, increasing its numbers, and after a while, the numbers exceeded all of its competitors. Simple, reliable, somewhat inconvenient and primitive, but with no issues both in the factory and, most importantly, on the battlefield. By the summer of 1941, the Germans seemed to have fixed the situation. The Panzer III finally won back the title of the most mass-produced medium tank, while the fourth version returned to support roles, but it didn't last long. Next batch of issues had to do with guns. The short-barreled ones were ineffective against Matildas. The Germans had known that, so they launched a rearmament program to equip medium tanks with 50mm and 60 caliber long guns. Soon they learned, though, that the Soviet KV-1 couldn't care less. The solution was to go for a long-barreled 75mm gun, and soon. But it wouldn't fit into the Panzer III's turret without some thorough upgrade, while the Panzer IV could sport one as if it came with it. That's how the Panzer III saw its decline, while the Panzer IV received a new life. And that's when the Germans started designing the Panther. At first, it seemed that this new tank would quickly replace the old garbage with its armor and weaponry, leaving the Allied engineers in the dust. But history repeated itself yet again. Panther production was slow, early tanks were full of problems, and the Panzer IV became the main tank once more. In 1943, the Germans made around 1,700 Panthers and 3,000 Panzer IV tanks. The Panther managed to gain the lead the following year, but the gap was narrow. By late war standards, the Panzer IV was poorly armored and showed poor mobility. Its gun, though, could still penetrate all enemy medium tanks, despite the fact that the tank was older than the Sherman, the Cromwell, and the T-34. For a tank made as early as in 1937, it was a surprisingly good machine. Our special guest today is the Super Pershing. Compared to the classic M26, it has a newer gun and improved armor with additional armor plates covering the gun mantlet and the hull's front. Why don't we check how good its defenses are? We'll start by sending a few 88mm APC-BC rounds used by the Tiger II. The only way the front plates work is when the distance exceeds 1 kilometer. Angling seems to be way more efficient, though, showing a good protection level even up close. The turret isn't that tough either, with vulnerabilities on the sides of the mantlet. Shooting at one side leads the shell directly to the ammo rack, while shooting at the other incapacitates the whole turret crew. Another vulnerability is found in these pipes on the turret roof. It's the vertical drive. It has almost no armor, and even the weakest guns can damage it. Destroying an enemy that lost gun control is simple enough. Next, the gun mantlet. This part seems sturdier. Even with multiple attempts, the round won't go past the breech. Damaging the breech is good, too, but the crew is still in, and after some repairs, the tank can continue the battle. Stronger rounds, like the Soviet 122mm ones, can penetrate the hull at basically any angle. Penetrating the gun mantlet will incapacitate the whole crew with overpressure damage. Let's see what Sabot rounds can do. How about this British round used in a 20-pounder? Looks nice. If we aim it at the turret, the result is similar to the German rounds we used in the beginning. As for the hull, it can penetrate the front plate and damage the engine even at enormous distances. Heat rounds handle the Super Pershing with ease. Even mid-tier ones with 320mm of penetration can inflict serious damage, hitting almost anywhere. The only exception is a part of the mantlet next to the barrel. A hit here will only damage the breech. Finally, the APHE shells. The most obvious way to use them is to aim at the turret's cheeks. A good hit there will destroy either the whole turret or explode the ammo. You can also aim at the commander's cupola to send an overpressure wave at the crew. The least obvious way is to shoot directly at the armor plates. Why? Well, the thing is, they're only meant to sustain a few hits. 2 APHE shells or 4 or 5 armor-piercing or HE shells. If you can't aim at vulnerabilities, why don't you create your own? Phew. Time to try and fix what's left of the poor Super Pershing. And now we're going to answer some of the questions you ask us in the comments. The first question comes from Risu. What is the 4-engine bomber with the lowest payload? Hi Risu, we'd say the British Sunderland. Its maximum payload is just 4 500-pound bombs. Next question comes from Nachle Antonio. Are the RT shells the same, or does each nation have its own caliber with explosive mass? Hello Antonio. Yeah, there's no change here. No matter the nation or rank, it's still 152mm HE rounds. Theo Siebert asks, can you torpedo amphibious tanks? Neither. Well, let's have a look. The in-game torpedoes are physical objects with their own properties, much like an amphibious tank. It should work, but we can always check. Let's send that tank to swim, send a torpedo, and we have a hit. Our next question is from Strike Eagle Gaming. Will you do a map guide, Karelia and Maginot Lines? Hi, we love Karelia, so we'd be happy to give you a map guide about it, but there's a slight problem. We already did. Check out episode 237 if you missed it. As for the Maginot Lines, we might do it later, of course. William Jessen writes, can we get more variety of sights on tanks? Hello there, William. Thanks for your question. It's a great opportunity to mention the amazing effort and talent our players showcase at live.warthonder.com. You can find vehicles, missions, locations, unique decorators, and, of course, lots of various sights. And our final question for today comes from Adam Leto. Which plane at what speed can fly slowest without stalling? Hi, Adam. The winner here is the Soviet Po-2, a light multi-role biplane. It can fly at speeds as low as 70 kilometers per hour. Wow, that's it for today. You've been watching The Shooting Range by Gaijin Entertainment, and the next episode will premiere the following Sunday at 4 p.m. GMT or noon Eastern Time. Once more, I implore you, subscribe please and click that bell if you don't want to miss our next videos. Don't forget to leave a like, share your thoughts and comments, and you got it. See you next week.